Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I hope you guys are doing well. So I remember when I was interviewing for Oracle, I faced this question: how you can convert any long URL to the tiny URL. I thought, why can't I take this opportunity to build a full stack React application? Okay. So this video is going to be a bit lengthy. I mean, not more than 30 minutes, I believe, because we are going to cover so many things. So firstly, we are going to build backend, and then we are going to build the front end. Okay. So inside backend, we'll be creating one web API controller, and inside that, we'll be creating one API method, which will be taking long URL as an input, and will be giving us the tiny URL as output. Okay. And then we'll be creating a React application from a scratch. So you are going to learn this, how you can create application from a scratch. So there we are going to use functional component. We'll be using HTML, JavaScript, and after that, the last part is we'll be styling our application. So for that, we are going to use the CSS in detail. So be there in the video till end if you are learning something from the video. Okay, and if you have not subscribed my channel till now, so please do consider subscribing it if it is helping you in any possible way. Okay, so let's go to the system and start building.
So guys, in order to achieve the tiny URL, okay, the first thing we are going to do is we are going to create one API endpoint, okay, which we will be consuming in our React application, okay. So for that, what I have done is I have added one controller class here. The name is URL Shortener controller. Now here I'm going to create a method, okay. So that will be basically HTTP GET method. So let's do that. We can write HTTP GET, okay. Mhm. Now let's create a method. So public I action result, okay. uh, we can write shorten URL, okay. And then what we are going to take as an input is a string, okay. So let's name it as long URL probably, because the URL we are going to take as input going to be the long URL, and the output will be obviously the tiny URL, or you can say it's a shorter URL, okay. Whereas the first thing we are going to check in this method is if this long URL is either not empty or not null, okay. So let's write that. So string dot is null or empty, okay, long URL, and then we are going to return a bad request, okay. So simply we can return a bad request, and then we can write one message, please provide please provide a valid URL, okay. So that's done. Now let's go to the actual implementation, okay. So we are going to use try catch here so that we can catch some errors if it is throwing, okay. So let's use system.uri, okay. System.uri, we are going to create one object of it, okay? So address is equal to new system.uri, not uri, system.uri, okay. And here apart from this long URL, we are going to take help of one URL, then we are going to simply append it, okay. So that should be fine. Now let's take help of system.neat.webClient, and we can create one object of it. So system.neat.webClient, okay. So that's done. Now let's write a string tiny URL is equal to, we can simply write client dot download string, okay, and then we can pass the address that we have created here, okay, and then we can return this tiny URL, okay. So that's done. So now let's go to the catch block. So let's say someone is not providing the valid long URL, then what we can do is we can return a status code, okay, that it's a bad request. So let's catch our exception here. So we can return and then a status code, okay. So status code under bracket status codes, let's take something of 400, what we have for 400 bad request, okay, and then we can print the error message also, okay. So it's dot message and then this one, okay. So done. So we have implemented this method. Let's test this method, okay. Okay guys, so in order to test our method, I'm going to take this URL. This is a very long URL, okay, and we are going to create a tiny URL, and when you click on the tiny URL, you will be coming to this website itself, okay. Let's run it. This is our method, okay, and here let's try it out, okay. So let's pass this, okay. Let's execute it. So if you see, we got this tiny URL. This is a very small URL, right? If you open this URL, a smaller URL, you are going to come to this page itself. Okay, let's see that. You have seen it, right? So we are able to come to this page itself. So which means our method is working. Now let's build a React application. Okay guys, so the next thing is we can create a React application from a scratch. Okay, so as of now we are in C drive, so let's go to D drive first. Okay, now we are in D. Now let's see how many folders we have. So I want to create a project inside uh, YouTube demo. So this is the one. Now here let's create a project. Okay, so let me show you parallelly what will happen when you do this. So let me create one application with help of create React app, and let's give the name as tiny URL app. Okay, let's execute it. You can see here tiny URL app folder has been created. So it's going to create a basic structure of a React application. So we are going to use that. Okay. Okay, so it's done, guys. Now the next thing is we'll go to the Visual Studio. So we are here into the Visual Studio. Now let's go to the file, open folder. Let's go to the D drive, and then where we have created our project inside YouTube demo code. Let's select tiny URL, select folder. Okay. So this should be your basic structure of a React application. Okay, so this is the source. So here we are going to create the JS file as well as CSS file. Okay, let me launch this application in parallel. Terminal, and let's go new terminal, and then you can write npm start. Okay, okay, so this is how your basic application look like. Okay, now let's build our application. Okay, let's create one file here. So new file, let's give the name as tiny URL comp component. Okay, dot js. So it's the js file. Okay, so guys, we are going to use functional component. Okay, so let's build our basic js file component. So import react from react. Okay, and then const, let's use the same name as this one. Okay, so tiny URL comp. Okay, so we are going to use the fat arrow function. Okay, now let's return it. Let's write a div. Okay, so this is the simple div we are going to write as of now. So we can write h3 tag, and then simply we can write tiny URL. What we can write application. Let's write that. So that's one. Now let's export this. Export default, and this should be your component name. Okay, so let's write it. So that's done. Now let's use this tiny URL component in your app.js. Okay, so I don't need any of these things, so let's remove it. Even I don't need this class name. Okay, now let's import that component. Okay, so you can write tiny URL component, and then you can simply use that component. So this is how we call the component from one class to another class. Okay, this is not required actually, so can slash here. Okay, once I save it, right, you will be able to see this change here. Okay, let's save it. So you have seen it, right? It's a tiny URL application, right? We are going to apply CSS at the end of this module. Okay, so just bear with me. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to create one input field and a button, where input field will take the a long URL. Okay, and then button is going to call the API. Okay, so let's build that. So I'm going to use one div. Okay, and here let's give the class name as input. Okay, so that we can take help of this to implement our CSS. Okay, and here let's do one thing. So what we are going to write first is input. Okay, so input type is going to be text. Okay, ID we can give it as perhaps long URL. Name can be long URL. Okay, and then value. Okay, so what would be our value? So for that, let's format it. Okay, so format document, let's close it. So I'm going to take help of use state hook. Okay, so we can simply write import use state hook. Okay, so where is that? Okay, I need to write one more. So use state. Okay, so guys, I'm going to declare one variable. Okay, and then I'm going to set the state of that variable. Okay, so let's do that. So we can write const. So we can simply name our variable as input, and then we are going to write set input. Okay, and then initial value will be we can write nothing but a empty string. Okay, so for now what we can do is we can take the value as input. Okay, and then we are going to write one function. So that will be on change. So on change, when someone change that input text box, that value should be updated. Okay, so what we can write here is we can write a function handle change. Okay, now let's close this input text. Okay, okay, what it is saying, handle change is not defined. Okay, let's implement this handle change first. Okay, so write const handle change. Okay, let pass a event here. Okay, now what we can do is we can set this input. Okay, so we can simply use event dot target dot value. Okay, so whatever we are going to write to this text box, that is going to be set to this input with the help of set input. Okay, okay guys, so if you see we are not getting this thing in center, which doesn't look good. So let me create one basic CSS class with keeping all this text align as center. Okay, so I can name it as main. Okay, and then I will use this class in the CSS. So let's create one CSS class here. So right click, new file. So we can name this file as tinyurl.css. Okay, so here we are going to write main class, and then we are going to put the text align to center. Okay, so that all these things will go to the center. So if you save it, it's still not gone because we need to import this CSS class here. Okay, so we can write something like import dot slash tinyurl.css. Okay, so now let's build one button. So we can write button, and so we can name it as something like get tiny URL. Okay, so that someone click on this button. Okay, it should hit the API and we should get our tiny URL. Okay, so we can write on click event. Okay, so we can write on click event. When someone click this button, it should call a function, and that function should be responsible for calling the API endpoint. Okay, so we can write the function name something like handle submit. Okay, now let's build this function const handle submit. Okay, and then here we have started. Okay, so we are going to call the API endpoint, right? So what we need for that is the library. So we are going to use Axios. Okay, so let's check whether we have the Axios in the package.json class or not. So in this file I don't see Axios. Okay, so guys, we have to install that Axios library. Okay, let's write npm install Axios. Okay, so once I click it, this package.json should be added with this Axios. Okay, so you can see this Axios has been added here. Okay, so here let's prepare our request first. So we can write const options is equal to, and then the first thing is method. So method is going to be it. Okay, the next thing is URL. So URL is going to be something we are going to discuss now. The other thing is the params. Okay, so the params will be, so the params is going to be something that is already there in the API. Okay, so guys, if you see what we are providing to this API, we are providing this long URL. Okay, so you need to write here long URL, and then you need to provide the value. So I'm going to provide this input, right, in terms of long URL. So this part is done. Now let's think about the URL. So this is our request. Okay, https this to this sort URL. Okay, so this is our URL, but I can highlight one problem with this URL. If you directly use it, you will be getting the CORS issue. Okay, so in order to avoid it, we'll take this part. Okay, we'll go to the package.json class or file, whatever you say, and we are going to add it as a proxy. Okay, so let's write proxy. Okay, and then let's write it this part of the URL. Okay, and then let's skip the comma, so that should be fine. Okay, so we are done. Now let's call the API endpoint. So we can write axios dot request, and then we can use this options. Okay, dot then. Okay, and then we are going to get the response. So here we are going to set our response. Okay, so let's declare one more variable where we'll be setting the response. Okay, so let's use it, but here we can write response. Here we can write set response, and then this will be also empty string. Okay, so let's set this response here. Okay, so we can simply write set response, and then here we can set response dot data, right? But it says axios is not defined. Okay, right, because we have not imported it, right? So we need to import it. So import axios, so that should be fine now. So let's write one more div class where we'll be displaying the output URL. Okay, so let's write div. Let's give the class name as output here itself. Okay, so class can be output. So we can simply write a label here. Okay, and then we can write your tiny URL. Okay, and then we can write a input text box where we will be displaying our output. Okay, so let's write that. So input id is equal to output, and then so we are mostly interested in value, right? So value will be response, right? Because we are setting the response here, right? So we'll be getting the response here. Okay, so let me just make this as output, right? Because this is quite confusing with the API response. Okay, so we can write here set output. Okay, and then we can use this set output here. Okay, so set output is going to set the output here. Okay, what it says. Okay, probably because of this, because we are not it given the value to this. Okay, so let's write it here. So that's fine. Okay, now let's see this whether it's working or not. Okay, so let me take one URL. Okay guys, so I'm going to use this URL. Okay, so this is a long URL, so let's see whether our application is working or not. So I'm going to put it here. Okay, and then let's hit this. So let's put a breakpoint here. So ideally it should hit this. So let's get tiny URL. Okay, it's is not a function. Okay, this has to be a smaller request. Okay, now let's get tiny URL. So we need to reload it, I think, because we have updated the proxy in the package.json letter, right? So let's do that as well. So let's kill this terminal for now. So let's go to the terminal, new terminal. Let's kill this terminal for now. Okay, so let's load this again. Okay, let me just go to the terminal, new terminal, npm start. Okay, so let's put our URL, click on this button. So here we go, we got the debugger. Okay, so let me just hit the continue. So we got the tiny URL here. Okay, let's copy this tiny URL. Okay, and then let's go to this page. Let's see. So here we go. So guys, let's add some CSS to make this page look a little bit better. Okay, so I'm just going to go to this tiny URL.css class. Okay, and then let's add it. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is we are going to add the CSS for the like it's a global CSS for your entire application. Okay, so we are going to set the margin to 0, and then we are going to set the padding to 0, and then we are going to set the box sizing to something like border box. Okay, so let's set the property for the main class. So let's do the max width with how much? Let's do 400 px. Okay, and then we can do something like margin. So margin can be 20 px auto. Okay, and then what else we can give? Adding can be 20 px. Then you can give the border as well. So border can be something like 3px solid, and then let's give the color as this one. The next thing we can give is box. Let's give the shadow as well. Box shadow can be 0 4px 4px, and let's give the color RGB. So here we can give 0 0 0 0. So you can see our application is looking bit better now, but it's still not that good. Okay, so uh, that should be fine. Now let's so what we have here in the tiny component.js is h3. Okay, so after this let's style h3. Okay, so we can write h3, and then here we can write, so we can give the margin with the bottom. Okay, so margin bottom can be 10px. Okay, and then we can talk about the font size of it. So font size can be 20px. Okay, and then we can talk about font weight. Okay, so font weight can be bold, so let's keep that as bold. Okay, so you can see the spacing has been done now. Okay, so the next thing is input. Okay, so let's give the styling to the input class. We can write dot input. Okay, and then we can write display as flex. Okay, and then the next thing is we can write align items to center. And then next thing we can give is margin with the bottom. Okay, because we have a output also, right? So we can give the margin with bottom as, let's say, 20px. Now let's give a styling to this input text box. So we can write dot input input. Okay, and then we can write flex as 1. Okay, and then we can give the adding as 10px, and then we can give the border as well. So border can be 1px and solid. Okay, and then let's give the color as what we given earlier for the main. So that's done. Now let's give the border radius as well. So border radius, what we can give is 4px around. Okay, so it looks good now. Okay, now let's style the button now. So button comes under this input class. Okay, so we can write input button, and then margin. So we want some spacing between this text box and that button, right? So we can write margin left. So I can give that as 10px. Okay, and then the next thing is padding. We can give the padding as, if padding as 10px and then 20px. Okay, okay, so that's good. We are getting here. Now let's give the background color. Okay, so let's give the background color as, what we can give here. Let's give, will it look good? Let's see. No, so let's choose some lighter color from here. Okay, see, still it's look a bit dark. Let's give this. Okay, save it. Okay, so now it's a bit better. Okay, now the next thing is we can give the color of the button text. So let me give that as white. Okay, then border is none. Then border radius. Okay, so border radius can be 4p. Okay, so it's look providing the radius. Then we have cursor. Okay, so cursor can be pointer. So now let's style the button with hover. Okay, so when we put mouse over here, something should happen. Okay, so input button, then power. Okay, this one. So here we can see the color. Okay, so when someone puts here, the color should turn to which color? Let's see, black. Okay, now let's see that. Okay, I mean the background color should change to black. Okay, not the this color. Okay, now let's see. Okay, so this is working. Now let's go to the output class because we have the output class as well. So we are going to apply CSS to this as well. So dot output. Okay, and they're going to make the display as flex. Okay, and the next thing will be align items. Okay, so align items can be center. Okay, and then uh, we are going to add the styling for both the labels and text box. So output and then label. Okay, so we are going to make a margin, right? So what we can write, margin right, let's keep that as 10 px. Okay, so the next thing is font weight, so we can make it as bold as well. Now let's style the text box. So output dot, and what is this, what is this input. Okay, so let's write input. Okay, so here mostly it will be similar to this. Okay, so let me just copy this. So I think it should be fine now. Okay. So this is how our app is looking now. So after applying the CSS, so it looks better, right? So one more thing, guys, we can do, we can provide a clear button here. Okay, so let's do one thing. Okay, let's write one more div. Okay, and here we can write button. Okay, then let's name it as clear. Okay, so what happened when someone clicks on this button, all this both input should be clear out. Okay, so let's write a function on click, and we can write clear everything. Okay, so now let's implement this function here. So it should be quite straightforward. So const this function. So I'm just going to set the state of these two variable. Okay, so if you see, we are going to set the state to empty. Okay, so we can use this set input, and then we can provide empty string here. Okay, and then we can use the other one also. What is that? Set output, is it? So we can make it to this one. Okay, now once you click on it, see both are clearing out. Okay, but let me style it out like this button. Okay, so what we can write here is just name this class as something. You can name it as clear. Okay, and then let's do one thing. Let's go to the CSS. Okay, and then right here dot clear, sorry, button. Okay, and then let's use the same property what we have given to this button. Okay, so margin left is not required, so we can remove it. Okay, so we can give the margin top. Okay, so margin top can be 10 px, so that it will have the distance from the above text box. Okay, okay, so where is that button? So we can include it here as well. Just the thing is, you need to change this class here, change the class, so that whenever we put here, it should change. Okay, now let's one final time, let's use this. Okay, get tiny URL, continue. So this is the tiny URL, we got it. Okay, now let's try to see whether we are getting the proper output. So yes, it's the same page. So thank you for watching, guys. मिलते हैं next video में. Till then, bye bye, take care.